The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Edward Bernays. Hi everyone. Before we start the show, I'd like to take a moment to thank iTrustCapital for sponsoring the show. iTrust is a crypto IRA platform that has over 25 different crypto assets as well as gold and silver. There's no monthly fees, there's institutional grade storage, and recently they've just lowered the amount to $1,000 account opening. So it used to be $2,500, now it's $1,000. And if you use my link, iTrust.capital/Darren, you can get up to $100 in funding reward just by using my link. So be sure to check them out. iTrust.capital/Darren.
We actually commissioned a report that showed that 76% of global institutions expect to use crypto in the next 3 years. That is across the board. 76% of global institutions. So this is no longer something that some banks are thinking about or some super hot fintechs that are represented on the panels or keynotes today. That group was out in front from the very beginning, and they're partners of ours. We love working with them, but this is going wider, deeper, and bigger. 76% of global institutions, which really means that you think about it, as you interact, whether or not you're in the BD function, you're ops, you're running a business, you're raising money, you're a VC, this field is growing by the minute, and the number of people playing on that field growing at the same time.
76% of global institutions are ready to use crypto in the next 3 years, which means the 24% remaining will have no choice but to upgrade or fail.
Well, I think we at Bretton Woods created an excellent set of institutions that have served the world very well in opening up trade and investment, and these developments have really led to more efficient economies, economic growth, and lifted billions of people from poverty. So we need to keep those accomplishments in mind. But these institutions, while I feel they should play an important role going forward, they need to be modernized to address problems, some of the ones that I mentioned in this speech, that are really challenges that we face today, and these institutions were not really designed to address. So I don't think we need to invent a completely new financial architecture, but we do need to enable these institutions to address modern day challenges.
Bretton Woods is where the world leaders met to iron out the US dollar as a reserve currency. Bretton Woods means a transformation of the global economy. This is not a buzzword, this is strong language coming from Yellen. We don't need to completely transform, we need to address some of these key issues and modernize the infrastructure. One of these issues is cross-border payments that digital currencies solve today. In order to keep this paradigm running, the global economy needs to accommodate crypto assets and treasure the efficiencies that it offers today.
For this world that we're living in now. So we've, for a long time, focused on using crypto and blockchain for cross-border payments with instant settlement, drawing from global liquidity, lines of credit, et cetera. And we believe that there is a bridge here that we've built. And as we think about what we've done in the last year, as we've turned this fiat-based payment system on with crypto and digital assets, 25% of our volume on the network now is done with our on-demand liquidity product, which is putting XRP on these rails, driving settlements and the movement of value extremely fast, extremely efficiently, in a way that is absolutely documented and is done with a very much of an environmentally green approach behind all of it. So we're excited about where this goes. But the fiat basis of what we started is important. So this element of traditional finance and the role in all that we're trying to do is still important. If we do our job and bring traditional finance along with what we're trying to do here, wow, it is an absolutely open field to run on. And we're very much seeing that open field running right now for all of us. Let's move to the next point.
We hear about DLT projects from the BIS, but these are just experiments, while RippleNet is a network of 300 plus financial institutions and are up and running and solving the pain points of liquidity in illiquid corridors. 20% of this network is using ODL. As more liquidity and more participants jump on for faster, cheaper, more efficient payments, the larger the network will grow.
Now, I'm not sure it's productive to think that of debt as it is. It is different from the on-budget debt. You cannot go down to the Social Security Administration and say, you guys have no way of raising this money, so I want mine in a lump sum right now. But you can go to the Treasury and say, I've got all these Treasury bonds. You guys have no way of raising this money. I want it now. You just sell them. But you can't sell your Social Security. You can't sell your Medicare. You can't. Those are not marketable debts. So that whole mechanics of I'm going to run away, I'm going to dump those things and drive their price down. That doesn't happen to Social Security debt. I think it's better thought of as a promise to pay that will get resolved. And I think, frankly, it's going to get resolved by cutting benefits. That's the way other countries do it. When the time comes that you run into a debt crisis. Now there's the U.S. I don't want to throw Graham. You're heartless. Throw Graham off the train. No, I think our social welfare system could be reformed to give people the money who need it a lot more effectively and waste a lot less money. But that's I think. Now, if you think that's what's going to happen, that's not quite the same mechanics as there's debt that when the Chinese and everybody else dumps our debt, that's a quick problem. That's a different problem than sort of people lose faith that Social Security is going to be there when they retire.
So a correlation.
The global economy is based on the dollar standard. What happens when dollars drastically lose value? Nations that produce goods and natural resources will lose wealth. Every economy is tied to the U.S. economy. And the system is slow and inefficient, meaning the dollars need to be held in order for trade to occur. This is a disaster in the making, and the end result will be for every nation to unpeg from the U.S. economy. Trustless and efficient protocols come into play. There is no longer a need to hold on to fiat while conducting trade. Instantly convert your goods and services for value that you want to obtain.
This week, we launched our Bretton Woods 2.0 initiative in line with many of the messages you delivered this morning. The goal is to help reimagine international finance for a new era.
Bretton Woods 2.0 initiative. The goal is to reimagine international finance. So if international finance is based on holding U.S. reserves, and Bretton Woods is a transformation of the global economy, what is Bretton Woods 2.0?
To labor, the environment, privacy protections, digital, treatment of digital business and services, that these countries might band together and form partnerships they can be open partnerships that other countries can join, participate in, so that it's not a closed grouping, it's a plurilateral but open grouping that we would encourage other countries to join. And so I think that type of development is something, the United States is certainly interested in that, and I think our partners will be as well.
Yellen is describing a walled garden in open systems. An open system is made possible with crypto assets. Remember, the rest of the world continues to innovate, and the regulators are not opposed to crypto as they are in the United States. This is because U.S. incumbents are stalling the progression, because they are positioned to make money from the inefficiencies, but they are well prepared for when this paradigm takes place. The Series C fund for PolySign was led by the Soros Fund Management and Brevin Howard. Soros as in George Soros, and Brevin Howard as one of the old boys club of banking.
That it was very unlikely that the FDIC was going to be willing to insure digital assets. And indeed, that seems to be still the case. So there's a little bit of a perfect catch-22. And I've raised the question that I sure hope that saying that stablecoins have to be issued only by insured depository institutions and then recognizing the reality that the FDIC will not insure any new ones, what does that do? It hands the whole industry to the incumbents. And I sure hope that the incumbents haven't been using the regulatory process to slow the innovators like us down. And they're scared of us. And I think with good reason. We have better technology already.
Regulatory capture is when regulatory agencies are dominated by the industry that they are in charge with regulating. Now, this will only work for so long. As I said earlier, every economy is pegged to the U.S. economy and is facing food shortages and economic depression. The rest of the world is moving forward with these technologies to prevent famine. The incumbents in the U.S. will have no choice but to move forward or be left behind. Today it was announced that the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Russia proposed to conduct settlements with African countries in cryptocurrencies and national currencies.
But not a direct correlation, and this brings me directly to interest rates. So can the Fed control inflation by rising interest rates? If it's directly correlated, if the government debt is a direct correlator for inflation, if we raise interest rates, aren't we enhancing the amount of government debt and only furthering inflation?
Yeah. Yes. So I do think buried in here, well, not even buried in here, there a reevaluation is coming. You know, we take for granted that the Fed is enormously powerful and can control inflation. That's a new idea. That's now new. Well, this is a show for people thinking about retirement, so for whom 1965 isn't that long ago. But there was a time even through the 1970s where people didn't think the Fed had that much to do with inflation at all. Now we think, oh yeah, higher interest rates, lower interest rates, that's everything. Well, the Fed has limited powers to affect inflation. It does have quite a bit of power to affect inflation, but especially when, as you're saying, if the fundamental inflation comes from fiscal policy, then the Fed has limited ability to fix it. As a metaphor, the Fed is about liquidity, right? So if the fiscal policy is the car's going too fast down the freeway, fiscal policy is the accelerator stuck to the floor. The Fed can drain some oil out of the car. That'll slow it down. It's not a very effective way to slow it down. And the fundamental problem is still that the accelerator is stuck to the floor. And you said something very deep, which I appreciate because it took me a couple of years to get to that understanding. The Fed's ability to cool the economy by raising interest rates is limited by fiscal policy. And I'll just draw out what you said. If the Fed raises it, suppose the Fed raises interest rates to 5%. Now, my colleague John Taylor of the Taylor Rule says interest rates should be about 9%. You got 7% inflation. You need interest rates higher than inflation in order to tamp down inflation. So the Fed is going on a forecast that almost all this inflation is going to go away its own. It only has to raise interest rates at 2 to 3% for the interest rates to be higher than inflation. No, watch out. The rule is for the Fed to lower inflation. Interest rates have to be higher than inflation. So if inflation does not mostly go away on its own, we're going to see some big interest rate rise. But will that even work? Getting to the point. If the Fed raises interest rates to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10%, that raises the interest costs on the debt. And those are big now. That means we have another $1 trillion or more dollars on the deficit. Then the whole debt problem gets worse, and the debt problem was what's driving the inflation in the first place. So Brazil has seen this dynamic. If you have an inflation that's being driven by too much deficits and you just raise interest rates, that makes the deficits worse, and that can make the inflation worse. So the Fed, sum up here, you can tell I used to be a professor. For the Fed to lower inflation by raising interest rates, it has to raise interest rates substantially. And we need at the same time fiscal policy to contract. Fiscal policy, you have to pay off the higher interest costs on the debt, or you have to convince people that you're going to pay them in the future, which is kind of the whole problem. So the Fed is limited in its powers in a bunch of ways. And one way is that it's going to need fiscal policy to go with it.
Inflation is at 8.5%. The Fed needs to raise interest rates above 8.5% to stop inflation. If that were to happen, the government does not have enough money to pay entitlements, Social Security and Medicare, as well as the interest on $30 trillion in debt. So they have some choices. They can either raise taxes, which even if you paid over 80% of your income, it wouldn't help. They can stop entitlements. Imagine the civil unrest if the government stopped paying for Social Security and Medicare. They could stop spending. That is not going to happen. Or they can borrow at 8%, compounding the debt further, causing inflation to get worse. Other countries hold U.S. treasuries. If they expected the U.S. to borrow at 8%, compounding the debt further, there's a good chance that they would sell those treasuries, causing interest rates to spike by themselves. So there is no good solution. When we hear Yellen and central planners talk about Bretton Woods 2.0, they know this. They are anticipating a transformation. This transformation will occur as a contingency plan. When there are no more options, we will have a reset that changes the paradigm. And digital currencies are certainly part of this new paradigm.
Much of our work next week during the IMF and World Bank spring meetings will be centered on how we can better support developing countries as they weather these shocks, particularly as they're still recovering from COVID-19. With over 275 million people facing acute food insecurity, I am deeply concerned about the impact of Russia's war on food prices and supply, particularly on poor populations who spend a larger share of their income on food. The multilateral development banks are already providing financing to strengthen domestic food production, to bolster social safety nets, and unlock trade finance.
XRP's greatest strength is liquidity in areas of the world that have been de-risked from correspondence, meaning it is very difficult to get money into these areas. XRP can move money to these areas that the IMF, World Bank, and Yellen are in favor of helping. Now, I'm going to get a lot of people criticizing this video, telling me that energy prices, scarcity of goods is responsible for the inflation, not interest rates. This is false. The role of the central planners is to curtail inflation, and inflation is an expansion of the money supply. If there are fewer goods, the money supply should have already contracted. Instead, these central planners are thinking that the supply chain bottlenecks will work themselves out, while keeping money supply high. No, they need to contract money supply so the costs of these goods are not bid up. Propaganda will never die out. Intelligent men must realize that propaganda is the modern instrument by which they can fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos. Edward Bernays. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this and wish to support my channel, please consider joining my Patreon. Patreon has ad-free videos, weekly Zoom discussion, exclusive content, and much more.